Welcome to this Killick Explains video series, and welcome to key pension questions number 1, which is should you and I have one? Now, why pensions at the moment? Well, very topical. There have been some rule changes which actually benefit certain types of pension saver recently. I'll be covering those in a subsequent video. But here the basic question is a reminder really about what the benefit of pensions as a savings vehicle actually are. So most of us plan to work hard, hopefully, and then at some point reduce our hours or stop working altogether. Don't like to talk about conventional retirement because most people don't look at it that way these days. They look at building up their peak savings and then winding down those savings at a point where they may not fully stop work. They may go to consultancy, may go to part-time, and so on. But how are we going to pay for life after work, even if we continue to do, say, part-time work or consultancy? Well, let's take a look at a few options in video 1 and just briefly summarise the sort of pros and cons. Now, I'll do more detail in other videos. I'll be referencing those at the end, but let's take a look at some of the options. So there's the state pension, more about that in a moment. For some people, there's property, buy-to-let, for example. Then you've got tax-efficient saving in the form of ISAs, individual savings accounts. Then you've got the topic of this series, pensions, and of course for a lot of people a portfolio approach where you blend some of those together, possibly at different stages of life after work, might be the most sensible strategy. So some thoughts, going through those in sequence. State pensions, can we just rely on the government to basically carry us through life after work? And I would suggest that's pretty dangerous for many people these days. Number one, you've got to ask the question, will the state pension be enough? Now, yes, at the time I make this video in 2023, the triple lock, as it's called, has been reinstated. So state pensions are getting some pretty punchy inflationary annual gains, but nonetheless, the absolute amount per week, per month, per year isn't sufficient for a lot of people to cover fully giving up work. Then there's the minimum age, which is continuously rising. Do you want to wait to get into what will have probably be for most people their late 60s, possibly older, to start drawing that down? And of course, the constant risk that the rules could change as governments, perhaps a future government, looks for a way to recoup some of the outlay annually that they're committed to. Perhaps pensions could become some kind of target, and the state pension could be one of those targets. Next, property. Now, I'm not going to say too much about property. I cover it in other videos, but it's not for everybody as an asset class. Leaving aside the fact we seem to be in a bit of a dip as I make this video, so midway through 2023, that shouldn't matter if you take a long-term view and look at sort of rental income, if you like, and rental yields. But nonetheless, the reason property isn't for everyone is it's quite a hassly asset to manage. You've got to find tenants, got to get the property to a minimum standard to meet the regulations, for example, and there are increasing number of regulations. You've got to manage void periods, repairs, and so on. The costs are rising all the time. The tax breaks that used to be quite generous are diminishing all the time. And it's an illiquid, not terribly fungible asset, by which I mean if you need money quickly, for most people selling a property is not the route they tend to go down. And it's not terribly divisible, like a portfolio of shares. You either sell it or you don't, if you know what I'm saying. So for all those reasons, property isn't perfect for a lot of people as a life after work asset. Now, individual savings accounts, on the other hand, yes, why not? The tax efficiency is good. Basically, once assets are inside an ISA, and those assets can be cash, bonds, shares, funds, then they're sheltered fully from income tax, from capital gains tax. The allowance is a generous £20,000 per person per year, and that's before considering junior ISAs. However, they are included still, and some people think this is a bit of an anomaly, in a death estate for inheritance tax purposes. There is a way of managing that. Perhaps during life after work, you use up ISAs first, for example, to minimise the risk they are part of a death estate subsequently, but there is that caveat. Now, pensions, the main topic of this series. Pensions are, well, for one thing, semi-compulsory these days, workplace pensions and so on. So the question I'm asking is, should you prioritise pension saving over and above the minimum, over and above what the state provides, over and above the minimum workplace pension, if you like? And I'm going to say the answer is yes. Why? They're very tax efficient. Every 80p in becomes £1 for a basic rate taxpayer. 60p in can become £1 for a higher rate taxpayer, albeit the process for claiming the extra 20p back is a little fiddly, involves tax returns and so on. So they're tax efficient on the way in. Within a pension wrapper, you've then got assets which don't attract income tax and capital gains tax. And bear in mind, on the way out, potentially you'll be older than you are when you save. Personal allowances tend to be a little bit more generous. And if you can basically draw down from a pension at a lower rate than you paid in, well, there's potentially happy days on the tax front. What's more, unlike an ISA, for example, an employer and an employee can contribute, all right? And employers will often not give you an alternative. They don't have to. So it's crazy to kind of turn down that contribution. You've got much more flexible access now. When you get to the minimum age, you can access a private pension, which is 55 currently. What I mean by that is the days of you must buy an annuity from a life assurance company have gone. You can flexibly draw down assets as and when you need them. And pensions are no longer, on an uncrystallised basis, to put it very crudely, part of a death estate. So there is the scope, should you have the assets to do so, to leave a pension untapped, if you like, and then to sort of hand it on to future generations. There are one or two income tax implications of doing that, which I'll come back to, but from an inheritance tax point of view, pensions can be pretty efficient. So, key pension questions number one, should you and I have one? I would suggest in the vast majority of cases, the answer's got to be yes. Now, if you'd like to find out more, I covered a lot of ground there in a short space of time. My video library is at killick.com/learn, and down the tabs here, there's a tax effective savings one for other pensions videos. You could also grab some copies of my guides. Now, there are 6 of them, there's just one on display here. One is about building a fund for life after work. The other is about generating income at the point where you dial down work. Those 2 guides are available editor@killick.com, and our quarterly magazine Confidant usually has a fairly meaty contribution from the planning team, and that again would be editor@killick.com.